Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today we're going to be talking about a huge piece of trade rumors coming out over the past couple of days with the Dallas Stars being linked to Chicago Blackhawks star Patrick Kane. Now, we've heard a lot of trade rumors really over the past month about Patrick Kane, his future with Chicago, and a trade that is pretty likely to happen, whether it be this offseason or potentially at the trade deadline next year, with him only having 1 year left on his deal with Chicago. But when it comes to Kane, how would you feel with the Dallas Stars, and what are the latest trade rumors surrounding him and a potential trade to Dallas? Watch till the end for all the details and all the info, and make sure to hit that subscribe button if you are new. 50% of you guys aren't subscribed, so if you like hockey and trade rumor content, this channel is the place to be. Now, when I saw this trade rumor, I kind of jumped out of my seat because it's from a reliable source, it's from a credible source, and it really sparked some interest for me personally in the Patrick Kane trade conversation and just gave me more realization that we could actually see a Patrick Kane trade happen. But let's go on to where this trade rumor actually came from, and it came from the Cam and Strick podcast, aka from Andy Strickland, who's broken a lot of good stuff over the past few years, talking about Patrick Kane's situation and the team, the Dallas Stars, that he sees as maybe the most logical fits and maybe the team that'll actually end up trading for him, especially this offseason within the next few weeks. Now, let's actually listen to this video because I think there's a lot to talk about here, and we'll be going through it kind of bit by bits and seeing how it all figures out. So let's start off with the very start of things with the very few first seconds and see what he says.
Somebody told me, watch out for the Dallas Stars. I mean, they've got to do some work here. They've got to sign Robertson, who I like an awful lot. They got to sign their goaltender, Oettinger. But they are looking. I mean, they look at who they have on the roster and where their window is. Like, if they're ever going to win, then they got to do it like now. If they're ever going to.
Okay, so few things. They're already on top of things with Patrick Kane being linked to Dallas. That the Stars would be the team to do it, according to Andy Strickland, to get a deal done. Talking about, of course, the players already have to sign and the situation they're in with their window. For me personally, I've gone and said time and time again that I don't think that's the. Even if they do get Patrick Kane, I feel like the Stars are still in a position where they're not truly going to be the Stanley Cup contender yet. And I feel like if they go for another year where they're kind of in the bottom 10 and get a solid pick, then I feel like after that you can start to contend. Because I think personally, the Stars trying to contend in Jamie Benn and Sagan's prime, which is long gone by the way for both of them, I think is pretty foolish. But they do say that the Stars window is still there, and if the Stars do feel the same way, if they do still feel like they have these next couple of years to truly contend with some of the older guys still, then Patrick Kane does make a lot of sense, especially again with that contract situation. But there will have to be some major salary retained for sure,
because Ben, Sagan, all these guys, they're not getting any younger.
Sagan just got married.
They're looking to make a splash, and I had somebody throw out the name Patrick Kane to me about the Dallas Stars.
That'd be kind of cool.
And because Kane's got 1 year left, and it's like, hey, if we're gonna, he could help us. Like, obviously, it's not like you're committing long term to him or whatever. Chicago would probably have to eat some money.
Yeah, $11 million.
But I had a birdie tell me, watch out for the Dallas Stars.
and there you go. So you get the kind of minute-long segment from that. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. But that is insane to think about. Andy Strickland linking Patrick Kane to the Stars, and again, linking him for the situation it looks like. Because of that shorter-term deal, apparently the Stars would be one of the teams going after him. And we have heard a little bit around other teams maybe going for Patrick Kane, but this is the first insider truly giving us a sizable link towards a Patrick Kane trade. A solidified team that will be interested and will be going after him. And from everything I heard in that article, it seems like if they are going to get a deal done, it would likely come this offseason before the year so that he can get accustomed to everything and the Stars can fully go for it this next year, which does make sense. But also, as Strickland does mention, there will have to be some heavy salary retention. I would say at the least it would have to be around 30%, probably around that 50% mark, which would eat into how much the Stars do need to give up. But just on the baseline, the Stars seem to be interested in Kane, and a trade could be happening. before the season starts. Now, of course, going to Patrick Kane, the player himself, even if the Stars aren't the team to get him, I think everybody should just know how solid Kane still is at age 33, of course, 5'10". And this last year, in 78 games with the Blackhawks, got 26 goals, 66 assists for 92 points. Even though I still think he's one of the worst defensive players in the league, there's so much offensive value with his playmaking game that I think the Stars, if they're going to go truly for it, would really be interesting with Kane, because we've heard a ton with the Stars how they want to add as much as they can on that top six, and specifically the wing. And I think as a right winger, as a pure offensive playmaking force, I think Kane stylistically fits pretty perfectly what the Stars need, what they need for this next year specifically. And again, considering that contract situation, that's the type of player that can really revolutionize that offense and especially make that power play way better than it would be right now. And even though I think the defensive shortcomings are absolutely horrible, at the same time, I feel like the Stars have enough guys defensively on that middle six. I mean, they just added Mason Marchment, for example. They have enough guys in that top six, in that middle six, that can play great defensively. And I feel like it depends on obviously who you give up, but I still would like to see Kane on paper with the Stars. But also at the same time, it feels like it might be a situation where that price tag is going to be sky high, and for the Stars, I don't know if I would truly pay it. And of course, you see the stats over the years. This last year, 92 points in 78 games. Last year in 2021, 66 points in 56 games. Then in 2020, 84 points in 70 games. And in 2019, 110 points in 81 games. And you obviously look at the offensive pedigree, and on paper, this guy is going to be perfect for what the Stars need. But again, I am hesitant for the person you bring in, and also just what you will have to give up. Because let's be honest, in a Patrick Kane trade, no matter the term on the contract, if the Blackhawks are going to trade for Kane, it needs to be something substantial. And we've heard that as well recently in recent articles. I've seen that in The Athletic as well, that if a trade is going to happen, it's going to be a haul, no doubt. But of course, looking at Patrick Kane's cap situation with the Blackhawks, he makes $10.5 million for the next year, and then will be a UFA in 2024. So you do have some flexibility. You're not totally committed to him with this long-term deal at age 33, which I think is something that is important. In some ways, it might be worse, but I think you also have the other situation, the other opposite side of the spectrum with a guy like Brent Burns, who was just traded, who still has very sizable term to his deal. With Patrick Kane, there's not a lot of risk there, and at 10.5, he has a no-move clause, which means that for the Blackhawks, if they do have a deal on the table with the Stars, they need to make sure that Kane wants to go to Dallas or wants to go to any team that has a deal on the table that the Blackhawks want to accept before a deal happens. But I do think for Patrick Kane, I think the Stars would be a team he says yes to. A good destination. I'm pretty biased in saying that, but I feel like with the options that they have, with the weapons that they have, I feel like Kane would still like to go to their team, like to play with players like Roope Hintz and Jason Robertson, and there would be a lot of options for Kane on that forward group. I mean, just imagining him with Jason Robertson, Joe Pavelski, and Patrick Kane, an all-USA line would be absolutely monstrous, and I feel like for Kane, there's a lot of potential there, and I do think if a trade does happen, if a trade is on the table that the Blackhawks want to accept, Kane would end up waiving and going to Dallas, if it's all going to happen right there. But you also have the line combos, and just looking at what Kane can bring to the Stars, there's so much there. You could, again, have that as first line of Robertson, Pavelski, and Kane. Then you could bump down Hintz to that second line and really make it a lot more diverse, let's say. You could have Mason Marchment on that second line, I believe, and then you could have Roope Hintz and Gurianov there, which I think would fit very, very well. Then you get a third line, potentially a Ben Sagan, and potentially a Peterson, potentially somebody else, maybe if Wyatt Johnston or Logan Stankoven comes up, which we'll get into the package going back to Chicago in a second, maybe involving those guys. But just overall, looking at the lineup, I mean, it's okay now, but if you add Patrick Kane, that offensive level just gets boosted up so much. And considering the goal-scoring ability of Hintz, the goal-scoring ability of Pavelski and Robertson, just a lot of guys that can bang in goals when they need to, especially in the power play. If this Stars team, if they have Patrick Kane, it would change the entire lineup. And specifically, Robertson and Pavelski along alongside Kane's playmaking would be absolutely nasty. Now here's the thing, what would the Dallas Stars actually have to give up in a Patrick Kane trade? Because that's really the thing that we have to look at here now, and considering their cap situation, they're in a really tough spot. The problem becomes with Kane only really having 1 year left and potentially being a rental, which we'll see if that actually is the case. But if he is a rental, I think for the Stars that kind of really changes what they can actually end up giving up. But I feel like for the Blackhawks, they will want as much as seemingly possible in the future. We know that they're committed to the rebuild. They want to have as many prospects and picks coming back in the deal, which I think for the Stars, they will be able to provide. They have one of the more underrated prospect pools in the entire NHL, and if they do want to give up maybe a couple, maybe one of their bigger prospects, I feel like there is a good chance that a deal does get done. Now, as for their cap situation, they only got $11.4 million of cap space, and as we talked about before, they got to sign Robertson and Jake Oettinger, which is really the two big roadblocks in the cap situation for the Stars right now, and in a trade as well on top of things. But I do think there is quite a bit they can do to make a trade happen. Now, for me, I think it's interesting because I think for the Blackhawks, I mean, in the Matthew Tkachuk situation, we were proposing that maybe Rupe Hintz would be going back to the deal as maybe a cornerstone piece at age 25, being an RFA next year. But I have a feeling that for Chicago, they're going to focus on their big assets coming back, being prospects and picks, and less players that will actually be impactful now. In saying that, I do think there will have to be some roster players going back. I mean, I think Radek Faksa and Denis Gurianov make the most sense, because if you are going to go with this situation where, let's say, you have the top three centers being Pavelski, Hintz, and Sagan, that makes Faksa's position a lot more expendable if you're going to have those three centers in those three positions, and I think that's what the Stars should do. You get rid of Faksa at his $3.2 million cap hit for the next 3 seasons, which would be super ideal in my opinion, and you can also get rid of Denis Gurianov if you really want to at age 25 at 2.9 as an RFA. He won't be the cornerstone of the deal in terms of value, so I think the Blackhawks would be open to taking him on instead of Hintz so they can get more value on the prospect and pick side of things. But I feel like Faksa and Gurianov, you get rid of over $5.5 million on that deal, and I feel like that's exactly what the Stars should be looking at as the two players that would go back in a deal on the roster. But after that, I mean, you would have to give up a 2023 first at the very least. That would definitely be going back. So Faksa, a 2023 first, and Denis Gurianov, and I feel like you would have to give up a top prospect. Now, to me, it's interesting. Do the Stars have to give up a Wyatt Johnston or potentially a Logan Stankoven? To me, I think it might maybe more realistic that they have to give up maybe a Maverick Bourque and maybe somebody on top of that, maybe a defensive prospect. Maybe they give up Christian Kyrou, who they got in this last draft. But to me, there's a lot of potential in a Kane trade, but I feel like it would come down to the 2023 first, Denis Gurianov, Radek Faksa, a top prospect like a Maverick Bourque, or maybe even more likely a Wyatt Johnston, and then maybe on top of that, a defensive prospect too. But I feel like it will be a haul that the Stars do need to give up, but also at the same time, considering how solid their prospect pool is overall, it would be a haul that I think the Stars can afford and still be pretty alright with giving away. I mean, Gurianov is a player that has made himself a little bit expendable, especially with how the Stars have played him in these past couple of years. Faksa absolutely is with his cap situation, and I think for the Stars, even though that 2023 first will be great to have, because this 2023 draft is stacked, I feel like for the Blackhawks, that will be maybe their biggest piece, and they might look at that as the biggest piece, especially if it's maybe a Maverick Bourque instead of Johnston. But I feel like for the Blackhawks, they're going to make sure they get the most youthful pieces in this deal, even if it might only be a rental for the Stars. But it's crazy to think about potentially Patrick Kane going to the Dallas Stars, but even if it isn't Dallas, we are going to hear a lot about Patrick Kane and even Jonathan Toews in next year or so. With this Blackhawks rebuild in full effect, these two guys might be on their way out and might be on their way out soon, specifically with Patrick Kane's side as well. But let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys think about Patrick Kane and the situation with Dallas? Do you see a trade happening? Where do you see Kane going? Do you see him going to the Stars or some other team? And what do you think the trade could look like? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Of course, share this video with your friends, get it to all the hockey and trade rumor fans you guys know online, and click on this card for all of my trade rumor content right in one playlist. My name is Nathan. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.